So, folks, as Twitter faced pressure from liberals, Democrats to somehow begin to warn people about President Trump's tweets, they decided that the tweets that they would put these first warning labels on and put "get the facts about mail-in ballots" is a legitimate policy dispute. So rather than kind of encouraging the free exercise of ideas, and I mean, the president has tweeted on a whole host of issues. Some are policy, some are not. But to weigh into a legitimate policy dispute, that there is a reason why every state doesn't use mail-in ballots. There's a reason why we don't have fully electronic voting. It has not been found to be fully secure. It has not been found to be a good fit, especially for the larger states with big populations like California, which it takes a much longer time to get their voting rolls correct, to make sure people are removed from voting rolls that may have left the state, moved out of the state. Where's a college student, especially now, when they don't even know if they're going to be going to their college campus, or are they going to be re-renting their apartment if they're not living on campus anymore? And so where is their home to get the ballot? And if that's the only option available to folks, what does that cause? And it's a legitimate policy discussion. You can come down on either side. But the truth is, when the U.S. government has put together bipartisan groups to look at this issue, those bipartisan groups have said, as this is as late as 2005, so following all of the election issues that happened in the 2000 election and what was going on there, and the hanging chads, all of those issues. Jimmy Carter and Jim Baker were both on this bipartisan committee, and they said the most potential for abuse, because it's not widely enacted, and it's not in the larger population states. The largest potential for abuse would be absentee ballots, paper ballots that everyone knows are going to the mailboxes. At a time when the Postal Service isn't even sure if they're going to be operating in a month, at a time when there are major delays in shipping and mail, it just poses a whole host of issues. So the president, he weighs in with his opinion on a policy issue that is put into the forefront because states are talking about trying to take these actions. So he tweets, "There is no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged, and even illegally printed out and fraudulently signed. The governor of California is sending ballots to millions of people. Anyone living in the state, no matter who they are or how they got there, will get one. They'll be followed up with professionals telling all these people, many of whom have never thought of voting before, how and for whom to vote. This will be a rigged election, no way." Now, if you see those tweets from the president, you'll see this exclamation point, Than, and it says, "Get the facts about mail-in ballots." And if you click there, it takes you to, of all places, CNN. And it says Trump, not President Trump even, Trump makes unsubstantiated claim that mail-in ballots will lead to voter fraud. And Than, one of the reasons unsubstantiated, and we'll get into it when we get back, is because this isn't widely enacted. Though we have absentee ballots, you have to go through a process to get those in other states. And a couple of states have done this vote by mail experiment, which is fine. If they're following the rules, following the laws, that's one thing. But there's a reason why it hasn't been widely enacted.
One of the most interesting things, Jordan, is that it is, in fact, demonstrably true that mail-in ballots are prone to fraud. So if that's not a legitimate policy debate, then nothing is. And look, and an executive at Twitter, Jordan, they're not the ones that should be arbitrating what is true and what is not.
Folks, the ACLJ is doing work all across the country on all the issues that you care about, all across the world on the issues you care about. And we're able to broadcast it to you because of your support. We're able to do the work in our country because of your support. We're able to do the work internationally because of your financial support. No amount too small, no amount too big. It all makes a huge impact. Go to aclj.org and donate today.
For 30 years, the American Center for Law and Justice has been dedicated to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms. Because of you, we've seen great success in the courts and Congress concerning the issues that matter most to you and your families. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
Our decades-long commitment to the Constitution and the rule of law is at the center of everything we do. The bottom line, our work could not take place without your generous support.
It's a critical time for our nation and our world. With so many challenges facing our country, the work of the American Center for Law and Justice has never been more important. And during this time of uncertainty, there's no better way to support the ACLJ than through online giving.
We truly appreciate your financial support. Without it, it would be impossible to do our work here and around the globe. And the best way to support our work is to make your financial gifts online at aclj.org.
Donating online is safe and secure, and an online gift at aclj.org can be put to work immediately, enabling the ACLJ to continue the battle against abortion giant Planned Parenthood.
These are our young people in their 20s and 30s that are doing this. They're fighting for life at a whole new level to beat back the abortion juggernaut. We've got a whole group of young lawyers that are defending them.
To protect Christians facing persecution.
The level of persecution is on the rise. It's being reported more.
We're talking about situations where people are put in jail, threatened with death or life imprisonment simply because of who they are and what they believe.
To stand up for our good friend Israel. To work to uncover the corrupt deep state in Washington, and so much more. Make a difference today. Support the work of the ACLJ online at aclj.org. Every dollar makes a difference. Give today online at aclj.org.
The president, who tweets often, and is someone, again, who is not using 25 advisors to figure out every sentence he tweets. And, you know, if you look at Joe Biden's Twitter account, you'll see a lot of the tweets that will come out of that from Joe Biden doesn't seem like anything Joe Biden would even say. It's not even like quoting him directly. It's like what they would like him to be saying if he was able to coherently get out his message in a way that was clear. And so, again, you can decide. It's a platform for freedom of speech. Now, should terrorists be able to utilize it to recruit? No. And so Twitter will oftentimes look for groups like ISIS and try to flag those, try to flag those and remove those accounts that are promoting illegal or violent activity. But if you're talking about a policy debate, and this is the bizarre part of this, is Twitter decides after years of the president, when he was a candidate for office, before he was the president of the United States, and while he was president of the United States, has been utilizing Twitter as a platform that all the media outlets, they may complain about what the president says, some of them, but the truth is they love the fact that he has the kind of this unfiltered way of getting of speaking his mind. They've decided to weigh in and start putting these warning flags, flagging his tweets on policy disputes 5 months before a presidential election in the United States of America. And there's so many issues with mail-in voting right now, especially one of them being that the Postal Service says that if they don't get a bailout in a month or less than a month, they may be shuttered. I don't know that will happen. I think that usually they work things out, but that's the kind of state of the Postal Service right now. It's a very difficult time. And to make matters even tougher, you've got the COVID-19, you've got shutdowns, you've got major delays. And listen, Than, at the state and state level, this has been done before. And you say states are the laboratories, but on a very small scale and not done. I think that the issue here too, when Wisconsin looked at doing something like this and a short term, it wasn't something they planned out years in advance. It was something they did like right before an election. They said no. The court said no. You can't change the rules 5 months, a month before, weeks before people actually go and vote. And I think that's the issue here too. Is why are we changing? I mean, obviously you've got to respond to crises, but we're talking about November, and most states are reopening. Even places like California with the most restrictions are starting to allow people to do more things. So you would imagine that by November, again, if you want an absentee ballot, you can request it if you don't feel comfortable going to vote, and people know how to do that. people who know how to vote, and it's not hard to find out how to do that. But to me, of all the times for Twitter to weigh in, this is could be chilling to the free exercise of ideas, and it's by far not the most controversial thing this president has tweeted.
No doubt about that, Jordan. I mean, I think there's an agenda behind why they weighed in at this point. Look, you zoom out a little bit, and we are blessed to have one of the best election processes in the entire world. But, Jordan, there is no serious argument to suggest that there is no fraud that happens. There is fraud, and it is demonstrably true that mail-in balloting has had a greater propensity for fraud than other forms of balloting. And, Jordan, as you pointed out, it's especially true when you talk about the larger states. You know, Utah trying to do a mail-in balloting is very different than California trying to do it. And my view has always been that these decisions are made best made closest to the people because you can secure them the best. And that's why we've never been for a federal government takeover of balloting, as Speaker Pelosi has proposed. But Jordan, for the bottom line here is that this is a legitimate debate because there's legitimate fraud that happens, and there should be more discussion, more debate about how to best secure the election. And what Twitter is trying to do here is shut that down. There has always been a need for people on both sides to put their ideas out so that states can choose the ones with the most merit. Jordan, if you push this debate behind the curtain, if you don't allow it to air, if you don't allow the real examples of fraud to be perpetuated, you know what you get? You get more fraud. No doubt about it.
Let me play this for you, and then I'll tell you who said it. Bite number 4, because I wonder if I just sent this tweet out and someone flagged it and sent it to Twitter, well, it's very similar. So, am I going to get this warning label just for quoting this individual? Take a listen, Bite 4. This is from 2004.
I just, as a very experienced, practical politician from New York, I feel constrained to observe that in my experience in New York, paper ballots are extremely susceptible to fraud. And at least with the old clunky voting machines that we have in New York, the deliberate fraud is way down. Compared to paper. When the machines break down and they vote on paper, we've had real problems.
You know who that was? You may recognize the voice. It's Jerry Nadler, Democrat, no fan of the president. Wasn't from 35 years ago or 40 years ago. It's from 2004. Can he have a change of position? I guess, but this is not. We're not talking about technological advancements. We're still talking about mail-in, hard ballots, paper ballots, and he said there. I just a very practical politician from New York. I feel constrained to observe that in my experience, paper ballots are extremely susceptible to fraud. So if I tweet that out now, is that going to get warning labels? I don't have as many followers as President Trump, obviously, and maybe again. So are they going to start picking and choosing? Because you can't have a platform like theirs and really figure out everything that's going on that you might disagree with policy-wise. I mean, a pro-life message, is that suddenly going to be something, again, that they're going to fact-check with Washington Post or CNN? And by the way, they love to pick and choose when they use Washington Post fact-checkers. You could go through a lot of things with Joe Biden, too. I think this opens up a problem. We've let this tech world, Dan, for the most part, evolve on its own, not be burdened with tons of restrictions. Understand that when you open up these places for free exercise of ideas, you will have the issues like groups like even ISIS trying to exploit that freedom and use it to their advantage. And then, obviously Twitter takes action on those. That's a totally different discussion when they kind of find out about it and as much as they can kind of stay up to speed with it. But no one has come down on Twitter to say, it's your fault. And because we understand what happens in the United States and this kind of liberty balance that we do with security balance.
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind the First Amendment, Jordan, when it comes to viewpoint discrimination is that you don't allow a tech company executive or the Department of Commerce to determine what is the appropriate viewpoint. And it shouldn't matter who is saying it either, Jordan. I mean, I go back to the example you just played from Congressman Jerry Nadler. Well, what if I have the position that voting with paper is the only way to secure the election? I mean, if one is an illegitimate response, then the other one would have to be censored in the same way if you're going to do it. And Jordan, it really there are two things at play here. One, if they don't like the person who is speaking it, it tends to get more censorship, or if it cuts against a narrative that they're trying to advance. And this takes me back to the very first question that you started this broadcast off. Why was it this tweet that they decided to take issue with? And Jordan, I think the proximity to the election and the direct impact on the election is what they are after. There's a narrative there, which is why they've decided to intervene at this point.
This is from the Wall Street Journal, April 10th. Quote, absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. That wasn't President Trump. That was, again, going to a 2005 bipartisan report of the Commission on Federal Election Reform that was chaired by former President Jimmy Carter. Okay? There's so much to get into on this specific issue. There's even a vote buying scheme. They say that it's very difficult to detect, and that's what Congressman Nadler said as well. It makes it tougher to detect the fraud if you have any of these allegations. And they go back, they look at a Miami mayor's race in 1997. There were 36 people arrested for absentee ballot fraud. They had to rerun the election, and the results were different. Different person won the race. So it causes, there is a reason why every state hasn't adopted this. And there's especially the states with larger populations where it takes time, even if you want to give these states a benefit of a doubt, which I think is, again, another policy issue you can have about voter rolls and how updated those are. You have to wonder, how is this going to be correct when you just start mailing all these ballots out and all you have to do is sign them and send them back?
Folks, the ACLJ is doing work all across the country on all the issues that you care about, all across the world on the issues you care about. And we're able to broadcast it to you because of your support. We're able to do the work in our country because of your support. We're able to do the work internationally because of your financial support. No amount too small, no amount too big. It all makes a huge impact. Go to aclj.org and donate today.
For 30 years, the American Center for Law and Justice has been dedicated to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms. Because of you, we've seen great success in the courts and Congress concerning the issues that matter most to you and your families. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
Our decades-long commitment to the Constitution and the rule of law is at the center of everything we do. The bottom line, our work could not take place without your generous support.
It's a critical time for our nation and our world. With so many challenges facing our country, the work of the American Center for Law and Justice has never been more important. And during this time of uncertainty, there's no better way to support the ACLJ than through online giving.
We truly appreciate your financial support. Without it, it would be impossible to do our work here and around the globe. And the best way to support our work is to make your financial gifts online at aclj.org.
Donating online is safe and secure, and an online gift at aclj.org can be put to work immediately, enabling the ACLJ to continue the battle against abortion giant Planned Parenthood.
These are young people in their 20s and 30s that are doing this. They're fighting for life at a whole new level to beat back the abortion juggernaut. We've got a whole group of young lawyers that are defending them.
To protect Christians facing persecution.
The level of persecution is on the rise. It's being reported more.
We're talking about situations where people are put in jail, threatened with death or life imprisonment simply because of who they are and what they believe.
To stand up for our good friend Israel. To work to uncover the corrupt deep state in Washington, and so much more. Make a difference today. Support the work of the ACLJ online at aclj.org. Every dollar makes a difference. Give today online at aclj.org.
We have very close elections now. If you go back into the last election cycle, President Trump had a big electoral victory. But if you look at the actual states, some of those victories, they were like outside the margin of recount, but they were still like within thousands, you know? So, I mean, they would come down to, you know, decisions like Hillary Clinton not campaigning in Wisconsin. And obviously the president won a lot of states back in that election cycle that had been a long time since Republicans had been able to carry. And he did it on a very wide swath. So I'm not sure there was anything she could have done. But there were those kind of issues where you start getting to under 1,000, under 2,000 votes. And you could imagine how that could be the case in some of these states come this cycle, then that's when the issues start getting very suspicious. And that is why you can look at and see there have been 1,071 proven cases of voter fraud, 938 criminal convictions, 43 civil penalties, 74 diversion programs, 8 judicial findings, 8 official findings. This has been a bipartisan issue of agreement, and it's why we have not seen more states follow Washington or Utah.
Because it's harder to secure them, Jordan. I mean, look, and they can absolutely change elections. I know you wrote about specific examples of this in your recent book, but just dating back to a comment that the caller made, Jordan, one of the regular problems that really every state has is keeping their voter rolls purged. So whether there are deaths or people moving out of the state or a change of status, whatever it may be, making sure that everyone on their voter roll is actually eligible to vote. And this is true whether you're talking about mail-in ballots or not. The problem with mail-in ballots, Jordan, is that purging process becomes more difficult. And I'll just give you one very generic anecdote. I have a neighbor whose mother has just been deceased for several years. She continues to receive an absentee ballot that she requested in the last election cycle before she died, even though they have tried repeatedly to get her purged from the rolls. Jordan, if you have a mail-in ballot and you receive that ballot in the mail, that person doesn't have to be there to fill it out. It makes combating that type of fraud almost impossible because the entire act of voting takes place in the privacy of the home. And by the way, the state initiated that interaction with the deceased voter. All they have to do is check the box, sign the signature, and mail it back in. That becomes very difficult to combat, especially, Jordan, if you initiate a process like that in how much time we have left now? 5 months before the election? It's going to be almost impossible to do.
Let's go to Kathy in Oregon on line 1. Kathy, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
I just want to thank you for everything that you do for us. In Oregon, Governor Brown personally implemented a new system into the Oregon's DMV. When a person goes in to change their address or even renew their license, it automatically changes their affiliation. And later, they will receive a postcard in the mail, and it tells them how to change their affiliation to their choice. Unfortunately, these postcards are not going anywhere, and when people go in to change their information, they are not told what is going to happen or what's happening to their vote. So many did not receive a ballot this term. We have not had, many people even received too many ballots. And then we had people that they're getting non-resident or Democrat ballots when they're supposed to be Republican ballots. She also made an executive order for non-citizens to receive a license. And now we have a non-resident alien that's coming forward as a whistleblower who has received 6 ballots since 2016. She went to the Secretary of State and her county registrar, and they told her to vote, and they got mad at her for complaining about it. So there is mail-in fraud, and we need to stop this. And we're getting hit. We have a trifecta in our legislation right now. So we are completely Democrat-ran, and they're running us in the ground, even with the COVID.
So this is what I want people to understand, because if you don't live in a state that has tried these experiments of utilizing the mail, and maybe you voted absentee before, but even now, unless you've got a reason, like you're totally out of the country, serving overseas, other issues, or you're going to be maybe gone, even because all these states that have adopted early voting. I'll tell you, I mean, that's how I voted in the last presidential election. So I still went. I went through the same thing you would do on election day. You just went to a different place. Because they're not as many open and the lines are not as long. You still go through the normal, same way you'd vote in person. And I'll tell you, it feels much more secure because you actually have to show up, you have to be there, than in the past, I've gotten an absentee ballot and you kind of send it off and you're like, okay, I hope this makes it, at a time when the mail service is under the most stress it's been under probably in decades. I mean, just to understand the significance of the issue, the chairman of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, she talked about this. She said in LA County alone, there's an additional 1.5 million people on the voter rolls that live in the county. that are of voting age. So, I mean, there you talk about the issues when you're dealing with very large cities. It can take years to get their voter rolls updated, and then they're behind by the time they do that update. Years behind. And so when you start saying, well, that everybody who's just registered, we're going to send this out to, you are going to have, as Stan pointed out, this issue of someone who continues to get a ballot for someone who may be deceased, for someone who's moved, for someone who's not at that address. How do you know where the 18, 19, 20-year-old is? And, you're going to put this on their parents and they've got to figure out, or are you going to try to send to a school? We don't even know if the schools are going to be open in some of these states. In others, we know for certain they won't be. So maybe that would have been their address, but now it's not. I mean, think about the issues you're putting on people. And are you, the secondary issue is, are you going to have same-day vote? Are you not going to have any same-day voting or the early voting in person? So are you going to cancel in-person voting? You can understand this is a real policy issue to discuss. It's not one that we have a ton of the reason why we have examples of wrongdoing, but not widespread, is because it hasn't been adopted widespread because of those examples of wrongdoing at the local level and state level at the few states that have adopted it.
Folks, the ACLJ is doing work all across the country on all the issues that you care about, all across the world on the issues you care about. And we're able to broadcast it to you because of your support. We're able to do the work in our country because of your support. We're able to do the work internationally because of your financial support. No amount too small, no amount too big. It all makes a huge impact. Go to aclj.org and donate today.
We're in a fight for life that is incredible right now. Barbaric and horrific. This is the New York State's law on unrestricted abortion. No protection for the unborn child.
Not only they passed it, they celebrated it.
Zero protection. Used to have personhood protection.
Right.
Now they don't.
That is now all completely repealed.
We've handled a series of cases involving those that are being persecuted for their faith. They called it terrorism, but they actually use in the indictment itself the word Christianization.
A principal comes and yanks your Bible away.
A teacher became aware that the student was reading from the Bible.
We're here standing for these kids and their families.
Prohibited from meeting with other Christians during recess.
We do have to fight against them when they occur. Otherwise, those abuses will win the day.
This is a fight that you're going to have to be engaged in. It's already a long-term struggle. It is not over.
We are so grateful to the people who prayed for us, and we are so grateful for ACLJ